All right, we're back here. Let's take a look at changing the level of my ground and adding our parking components, etc. So let's go back here to my site plan here, and I can see the level of my ground. It dips off from the top of my screen to the bottom of my screen. It's 770 feet here at the top, according to these lines, 769 in the middle, and 768 towards the bottom. I want to level things a little bit more around my house so that the ground right where my house is a little flatter. And I'm going to pick 769 as my choice in elevation for that spot. Raising things a little bit near the back end here and lowering things a little bit towards the front end here. So to do that, I go to massing and site. I'm going to select my topography here. I'll know that I have my topography selected because over here in my properties browser, it will say topography. You'll see that the material is site grass, and I have my edit surface button selected up at the top here. I'm going to go ahead and choose my edit surface button. And when I get that, notice that I have a bunch of little dots that appear. These dots are elevation points. Let's go ahead and pick one of them. All right, so these points choose the elevation at that point. So that point there is elevation of 769 and 7 and 143/256 of an inch at the top of the map here. So when this map was made, only the elevation at the edges was selected. There's no elevation points in the middle of the map. You see how that works? They've only got all the way on the edges here. 774, that corner. We are down here at this corner at 767. And by putting those points in, they've selected what the topography is, and then the topography changes smoothly from where those points are to where the other points are, and it kind of affects the rest of the map. We're going to add in some new points. I'm going to come in closer here to my building. And you see at the top here under Tools, I have Place Point, Create from Endpoint, and Simplify Surface. Create from Import would let me have a group of points that I've created from another resource. I could get topography from online maps. Mr. Laughlin does a fair bit of that. He's actually been doing some of that in his class. Do any of you have him for class? He does some of that online mapping and getting resources from the USGS, that kind of stuff. And you can actually get points. You select an area, get the points, import them in here, and automatically create what your topography looks like. You can create that automatically. We don't have anything like that, so we want to manually change this information. So we're going to actually place a point. And I'm going to choose my elevation before I place my point. Because if I just place my points now, what am I doing? If I click my points first, before changing my elevation, what am I creating? If I click 4 points, bloop, 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 right now, I'm creating a 769-foot deep hole. Because right now my points are set to be 0, 0. Do you see that? Okay. So I want to come up here and change this number, and notice I have a drop down that says absolute elevation. I can also change it to relative to surface, which allows me to do plus and minus inches and feet and gives me a more granular choice based on what the surface currently is. That's a little fiddly. You really need to know what your surface currently is at the specific place you're clicking on. I don't have a good sense of that at the specific spots I'm clicking at. So I'm going to leave it at absolute elevation and change this to be 769 space 0. That's what I want to be all the way around my house. I'm going to give it a bit of a buffer zone out from the house here. I'm going to click, 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 click. And notice the topography changes. You see those lines? They change to match what I've created now. And now I've got a nice flat space around my house. When I'm done, I click the green checkbox. And now I've changed the topography. Now, we think, what have we done? All we've done is click some points on a map, right? We've not done anything. What has to be done to create this? Somebody with a bulldozer has to get out there and bulldoze this and then make some changes. So in reality, what would have to happen is a copy of the original map would have to be created, and a copy of the new map would have to be created, and those would have to be provided to the guys who'd be out there on the bulldozers and tell them, this is what you have, this is what we need, go from this to that, make this change. And then it would be their job to figure out how to make that happen. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's take a look at what we have now in our 3D view. Yeah, I've got a nice flat surface around my house now, for my house to live on. So let's come back here to my site plan, and now we're going to add in sidewalks and driveway. Let's do our driveway first here. There's a couple of different ways to add in new surfaces. We have split surface and subregion. A subregion is a new material within the surface you already have. This is typically used for surfaces that will follow the topography of the original surface, and that when the original surface changes or is updated, the surface will follow that. This is good for a driveway. You don't typically, most of the time your driveway follows whatever you've got and goes to your house. We don't typically flatten out a driveway except to a certain point. Split surface takes the surface you have, cuts out a portion of it, and makes it its own separate surface that's editable separately. That's actually what's been done here for this concrete walk. Do you see how I hover over this and I get one surface? I hover over the concrete walk and I have a separate one to choose differently. That's a separate surface that's editable in its own way in a separate section, because the concrete walk has been created as its own thing, that it has its own topography with its own points, with its own heights and whatnot. We often do that separately. I prefer, for most of your residential stuff, we're mostly going to use our subregion, because that is simpler to do for the most part, gives us what we need, and most of the stuff around your house doesn't have heavy grading. Most of the stuff around your house follows the topography of your house. Even if you've got a small sidewalk around your house, it mostly follows the topography of your house. Most people don't get big backhoes in to flatten out sections for small sidewalks. It mostly follows the topography of your house. So we'll use subregions for the most part. So I click in subregion, and I draw the subregion. I'm going to make a very simple driveway here. I'm going to come in from here, up, over, down, connect. There, driveway. And I'm going to annotate aligned, and I'm going to get the width of that space. I want to change that to be 3 feet. Because I actually want to stick a sidewalk in there. I want that to be 3 feet in that space. And actually, let's make it 3 feet, 6 inches, so I have a little bit of a gap space there too. And we're done. And now I can select this, and let's actually go to 3D so you can see it. It's created this little subregion, and it's brown by default. It has no material. So I select it, I go to material, and I can give it a material. Most materials that are on your site plan start off with the word site. So we're going to just type in site and see what we get. And you'll notice they all have this little exclamation point at the beginning, because they're all the old materials. Let's see if we can find an asphalt that's a new material. Can we find a new material asphalt? A dark gray asphalt. Let's see what this looks like here. Seems okay. We'll try the dark gray new asphalt here and see how it looks. Not really the effect I'm going for, is it? So I'm going to use the old one. I think that's fine. For asphalt, I'm not super worried about how high res it is. So I'm just going to go for a site. And I'm going to pick site asphalt. And that's what I'm going for. There we go. Okay. And now I'm going to also put in a sidewalk from the driveway around the front to my porch. So I can walk from the driveway to the porch on a sidewalk. So that's the next one. I'm going to come here. I'm going to do another massing and site subregion. And I'm going to draw. I'm just going to draw and I'm going to measure later. All right, now I didn't close that. I'm going to use this tool here, this make a corner tool to make a corner. And then I'm going to measure, annotate, aligned. Measure between these two. Let's move this one. Make that be 3 feet. Annotate, aligned. Those two. Move this one. Make it be 3 feet. And then annotate, aligned. Let's actually move this one down first. And then annotate, aligned. Move that one. Make it be 3 feet. And my sidewalk. Finish. 3D. Select. By category. And we'll go to site. And I'm actually not going to do the site. I'm going to do concrete. And in this place, I'm going to have concrete cast in place. Let's see if I've got a new concrete cast in place. Here, our concrete walkway. That'll do. Concrete walkway. And we're done. All right, so that's good enough for now. That's changing our topography and adding in our 2 spaces here. All right, last video coming up here in a second is going to be adding in your site components, trees, that kind of stuff.